Welcome everybody. How's everybody doing today? Good? Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for being here to the launch of our TF Blockchain San Antonio chapter. I want to give a big round of applause to Jacob and Efren for helping making this happen.
Thank you.
So I'll talk a little bit about this, and I'll bring you back up here, and we'll chat some more. As I said, my name is Jonathan. I'm the founder of TF Blockchain. We started TF Blockchain about 15 months ago. We had our very first conference in Seattle. And the whole reason why we started it is because I actually had a company in the space, and I was attending a lot of conferences and events. And I wasn't really a fan of the way a lot of the events were kind of focused and orchestrated, because they were more about kind of really early type topics, but then also it was, there wasn't a high emphasis on networking. So as you all saw when you came here, we're like, hey, here's some sample questions that you can ask each other. Use that as an icebreaker. That's a really big part of what we do, because we figure there's two main reasons why you're coming to an event like this, is because you want to learn something interesting and you want to meet interesting people. And so we try to definitely make sure that can happen. So we've actually had 4 conferences that we've done to date. Our last conference was actually just on Thursday of last week in Seattle. Jacob actually came up for that, and so did David Kruger, who's here. It was our 4th sold out conference that we've done. What we do in those conferences, we have panels and fireside chats and speaking sessions, and then we connect folks together throughout the event. So we'll do things where we'll have like that networking question that we asked you when you came in. We have dedicated times throughout that event to make that happen. And I think Jacob and David will let you know that those are definitely a really good way to meet folks. Mm-hmm. So our goal is to really continue to grow community and to grow different chapters, and also be a link between those communities. So we have a chapter in Austin, for example, and that's actually how Jacob and I met. We actually have an event tomorrow night in Austin that we'll be doing. So definitely want to make sure that you all are able to come up to Austin at times and have folks from Austin come here and really just be that connection, but also across all our other chapters. Mm-hmm. So we're considering and very likely going to be starting a Dallas chapter here shortly, but we have chapters in Seattle, Vancouver, Portland, San Francisco, and we're soon to be launching in Chicago and hopefully Washington, D.C. here shortly, in addition to the locations that I just mentioned.
Any international?
Vancouver, Canada, but definitely intentions of going international as well. Really what allows us to go internationally is if we can find a chapter lead, someone in that area that's interested in starting a chapter, and we can provide a lot of that infrastructure and support to make that happen. Because what ends up happening for most is the thought of starting something from zero is just really kind of overwhelming, and so we're really that support network to make sure that happens. And then we can also leverage our community that we have established already. Our hope is that we're able to bring folks to San Antonio, investors and founders and speakers who might not have come to San Antonio otherwise, and allow them to talk and discuss what they're working on in blockchain. Last thing I want to let you all know about is that we're going to be doing our will likely be TF6, our 6th conference in Austin in June of 2020 is what we're targeting right now. And so we'll be there tomorrow looking at different venues to potentially host that at. And then TF5 is likely going to be in either Vancouver, BC, or Los Angeles in the end of March. That's where we're targeting right now. And then, finally, is that another thing that we do is, because we're really focused on making connections and so forth, we have another aspect of our company called TF Labs. What TF Labs is our consulting side of the business, where we work with companies active in the space or those looking to get into the space. And we just provide product strategy, overall blockchain product strategy, because really what happens is we end up having conversations with folks who say blockchain is something I'm interested in, but a couple years from now. And if you were interested in building a house a couple years from now, you'd probably start doing the planning now, right? You start thinking about it now. Or if you wanted to become a doctor, you wouldn't say well, I'm gonna become a doctor 2 years from now, so that's when I'm gonna start studying 2 years from now, right? So it's all about creating that initial plan and strategy around what you're doing, and really having an understanding of that. And so that's definitely something that we do and want to make available to anybody here. With that, does anybody have any questions before we get started? Yeah, go ahead.
TF Labs, the type of consulting that you offer? Can you give an example of?
Yeah, very much so. So the best way to think about it is, you know, we're working with companies that already have some level of product market fit. So they have an existing product in the market that people are using, right? And now it's, hey, how would I incorporate blockchain to make this, you know, better? Or what are the aspects of our existing business that might need blockchain elements towards it, right? That need to have some level of record management, or that you know, there's multiple participants that need to have access to something in a future date. And so, you know, you think of these different use cases, you know, that come up, but it's more of not talking about from the use case perspective, but zeroing in on the customer's actual product that they have and say like, hey, this is actually, you know, you have this person that needs to pay that person, and then they need to look at this later. That might be interesting for a smart contract, right? Or, you know, go ahead.
Sorry, so you'll get involved in the planning discussion when you're doing your software engineering. You'll get involved in the planning discussion required to output some sort of use case using blockchain.
But relevant to their actual product, exactly, right? So not in the high level format of like, hey, this is how blockchain works. No, like this is your existing product offering that you already have in market. This is how it might look like if you started to incorporate like a blockchain element to it, tokenization, how you might interact between the participants of the network. Like, you know, the best example that I can give for that is loyalty, when you think of like loyalty points and rewards, right? So, you know, if you were to create a loyalty payment system or a loyalty reward system today without being felt like you had to be building on the existing rails of the last 20 years, you might really start thinking about in a cryptocurrency type context, right? And like how the relation between earning and then documenting the record management against what you're earning and so forth can be captured inside of the token. And when I'm saying token, I'm not meaning like cryptocurrency token. I mean like just what a token is like basically a packet of information, right?
Yeah, like
As value.
As value, exactly.
digital value. Like
Exactly.
gold,
Yeah.
but not gold.
Exactly. So it's just thinking through, it's really just thinking through and creating that strategy around it, because though a company might really have a good understanding of what their product is, it's thinking about how blockchain could factor in there. It doesn't have to be some big crazy foreign thing, right? And it very likely isn't going to be this very huge decentralized autonomous Bitcoin-like way. It's probably going to just take elements of what's existing and what's out there to model and use for their use case or for what their need is. Maybe it isn't decentralized. Maybe it isn't, you know, even a cryptocurrency or any of those things. That's okay. That doesn't mean you can't have a strategy that encompasses some of those elements towards that to make that happen.
I think one started your panel discussion, right?
Yeah.
That was your softball. you
Yeah.
know?
So you guys, I mean, if I remember right, you guys not only do the strategic consulting, you do the technology consulting
Correct.
as well, even extend into development and that type of thing.
100%. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah,
So
the reason
full service.
Full service, yeah, we can go end to end. But what we find is a lot of people want to be on the development side and get things built without realizing that they need to do a lot of the strategy ahead of time, right? So my background is in product management. I've been a product manager for the last 12 years or so, and I actually teach product management through the continuing education program at the University of Washington. And if you were to develop any software, regardless of blockchain or not, you create your product strategy, right? You start thinking about like how that product works, and you create requirements against the product that you're going to be building. Then you consult with the technology team, or you start thinking on the technology requirements before you even start writing code, right? So think about it in a similar way, just now thinking about it from a blockchain context is really what we're doing in establishing that. And then also because we have the TF blockchain in our conferences and our events, we just thankfully have a very vast network of interesting folks that we're able to either get involved for making connections or investing or you know, finding potential partners and things like that we're able to leverage because we're able to do these, you know, these events that we do. So it works out quite well. And last, I guess, when it comes to the labs, we're also building some of our own independent projects, kind of like a startup studio. and we have some interesting things that are coming down the pipe that we hope to be releasing here shortly.
Is there a blockchain accelerator yet that you know of, or?
There are definitely different blockchain accelerators. We're kind of operating in a more studio capacity where we're building our own. We've considered, because what we're taking our own companies through is essentially an accelerator model. So we've been considering what that might look like, is having a few companies that we do in that accelerator model. But there definitely are, like Techstars, for instance, has a blockchain Techstars program that they do out in New York.
Okay.
And there's a couple smaller ones as well.
You figure they'd be on that.
Yeah. But so there's definitely some opportunities there. What we're finding too is that a lot of the traditional investors are still they're still a little slower to kind of decide to invest in blockchain right now.
Is it because they hear blockchain and you say blockchain and they hear crypto? Is that where they're kind of at?
I think for some it's that. I think for others is at least a lot of the investors that I know, like they very much believe in blockchain as a technology, and they think it's going to be something really interesting. They just don't think it's ready today to make from an investment standpoint, right? So like a lot of the ones that I know and again, I'm speaking of traditional investors, are more on the lines of, hey, that is really interesting. I want to keep paying attention to it. I want to keep learning about it. Keep letting me know what you're doing. But I don't know that you're going to be able to make this work just yet. But then what's interesting about that is it's created this new form of investor, which is essentially your blockchain investor, blockchain venture capital. So you have folks like Anthony Pompliano with Morgan Creek Digital. You have the Galaxy Digital, which is Mike Novogratz's. You have the Winklevoss twins.
Pantera.
You have Peter Thiel. He has a fund that's investing in crypto.
Layer
there's
One.
a lot of other smaller ones
Jeremy's
as well.
working with him on a project too.
Yes, you have a lot of other smaller ones as well. So I think it was what's the company? Is it BlockFi? There's a company that does interest on cryptocurrency. BlockFi, yeah. So BlockFi, they raised 18 million like 2 or 3 months ago. And if you look at who their investor list is, it's all of these blockchain investment, blockchain, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, venture capital, which is really interesting. What's that?
Nexo?
I'm not familiar.
TechCrunch guy? The guy from TechCrunch made Nexo?
So
He was an
Michael
investor
Arrington?
in it.
Oh yeah, I'm not familiar with Nexo, but yeah, Michael Arrington has his Arrington
Nexo's
Capital.
just like Celsius, but they were before Celsius
Oh
Network.
god, oh yes, of course, I am familiar with them.
They're
yes.
from Credit Systemo.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yep, I'm familiar with them now. Now I remember that. Awesome. Well, yeah. So with that, what I want to do real quick is I want to invite Jacob up here really quick and I just want to interview him real fast. So come on up. We'll kind of almost do this like as a guide. No, I'm just kidding. So what we do at TF Blockchain, like I said, is we're really all about connecting folks and that networking piece. And then our goal is to get the information to you in a very digestible and consumable way. And so the reason why we do everything as an interview, as opposed to just having someone stand there and talk at you for 30 minutes, is because we can hold each other accountable from a conversation standpoint, and then we can legitimately ask questions. And so really the goal is, if Jacob and I were having dinner somewhere and we were having a conversation, we want you to see what that would look like, right? And so that's kind of like I tell every single speaker when we go on stage or we talk, is like, hey, don't slow things down for anybody. If something doesn't make sense to you, it's actually a good thing, right? Because that means that you're learning something. If you understand everything that's coming out of what the person is telling you, then you probably haven't learned anything new, right? So that's really our goal here. So Jacob, I'd love if you introduce yourself to those that are here and give them a chance to learn about you.
Jacob Maddox, partner at Bargain Endeavors and TerraBlock. Quick background, a lot of development and finance experience and infrastructure projects over the last 15 years. Worked in Maui, Texas, and American Samoa, and internationally. Found out about blockchain probably 2014 was the first time. was actually working for Maui Electric and had a client that had a $20,000 bill.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you doing? We're mining Bitcoin. I'm like, what's that? Like, this digital currency. So my educational background is in economics though, and finance, and so started just piecing it all together and realized, my gosh, this could be the next digital store of value. Already kind of heavily involved in games, so I knew digital currencies and intrinsic value of digital assets. And so went up probably about 3 months ago to the event that you had in Austin with Jimmy Song, and that was, you know, one of the main reasons why I like that. You had a very knowledgeable speaker.
Yeah.
Their presence that has been in the game and that is willing to share their information.
Totally.
And so that caught me. I went up there with my partner Ephraim and like, hey, how can I help?
Yeah.
And that kind of led to this right here.
No, that's great. That's great. And yeah, you know, whenever we invite speakers, our goal is we frankly want speakers that want to be there, right? So, you know, we don't pay for our speakers. We don't charge our speakers. Like, we want them to be there because they want to be there. So, you know, what gets you interested about blockchain? Like, why are you even interested in this to begin with?
Because I don't know, I've always had a knack to look at the large picture, right? And then try to piece all those things together. And for me, it was all these elements of finance, but political and social elements that the internet opened up information to the people, and I think that Bitcoin and blockchain is going to open up money to the people.
Yeah.
Right, and that's very important to me, because as we see, you know, me being at the upper edge of the millennials, you know, born in 82, my generation is going to have a very hard time to acquire the traditional assets that made the baby boomer generation wealthy. PE ratios are extremely high on stocks. You have negative interest bonds throughout the world, and real estate is overpriced in most of the areas already.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And
My stepdad, you know, bought his first house in Seattle for, this is probably like the early 80s, for $32,000. That same house right now is probably where, he doesn't own it anymore, but that same house right now is probably like $600,000,
Exactly.
right? So, and you know, sure, the amount you made back then wasn't the same, but that ratio is a little.
The CPI, true inflation and CPI didn't take the earnings away as much then,
Yeah.
right? And so that's what I think Bitcoin and blockchain has that capacity.
Yeah.
But it also brings that capacity to bring this single source of truth a lot, especially for organizations that need to share the data,
Yeah.
right? So.
So last question for you is, so why are you doing this? Why do you want to start this chapter? And
Because I want all of them to tell more people and build up the San Antonio blockchain community. I think there's a lot of interesting people and technology and ideas in the city. And it kind of has that like Philly, that underdog. We're always overshadowed by Austin and Dallas and Houston. And I think it's time for us to rise up. All right, and we have great backing from governmental to insurance to cyber tech security here, and that's it's just complements blockchain technology.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I'm super excited to be here. You know, obviously I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you and Ephraim.
Thank you.
So I appreciate you both really being interested in doing this, and I think that we can, yeah, exactly like you said, I think we can grow blockchain here and be just, you know, a stop and a connection point across our community, and really just grow that. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
So with that, I'd like to invite our speakers up here to chat, and we'll kind of have a quick conversation. I'm putting David Kruger on the spot too. You want to join us?
Sure.
Yes. Yeah, no idea. But David was actually one of our speakers at TF4, and I thought he'd be a good addition. So come on up. I'm gonna grab myself a water real quick.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw another chair in here.
Think so?
Going to sit in the middle?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Y'all are gonna get close.
Yeah.
It's kind of like watching a movie. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I'd love if you could just kind of run down the line and introduce yourself real quick.
So my name's Eric Powell. I have, I guess where do I go from there? I mean, I run a company called Ryle Industries. It's a cybersecurity company, but I also started a company called Ruddup Capital Investments. So I'll just focus on that one. It's 10 of my closest friends and family got together and we said, you know what? We really need to learn about blockchain. We need to invest in it. And so we started putting our money together and we started heavily investing in it around the time that Bitcoin was peaking. So
That's a good place to start, and we'll dive deeper into all that.
Okay.
My name is David Kruger. I'm with the Absio Corporation. We're located out of Denver. I'm out of Dallas, and we're emerging into the commercial market from the military intelligence world, where we developed a new type of cryptography technology that is capable of extending the security and control of the blockchain to off-blockchain data. So we're a blockchain user ourselves.
I'm Jose Padilla. I'm an attorney. My background, went to Harvard undergrad, Penn for law school, worked at big law firms, working with startup companies. Actually the whole kind of life cycle from a startup, getting their initial investments, all the way to their exit. So I've done a lot of mergers and acquisitions and IPOs as well. Then I've worked in-house as a general counsel at a lot of companies. And recently started my own practice here in San Antonio because I wanted to help startups to try to get private equity financing and to grow.
Nice. That's great. That's great. So I want to start with you when you're talking. So you got in at the peak. So when you're saying investing mainly on a currency standpoint, are you investing in companies as well?
No, we're just doing cryptocurrency. So, well, here was it. I was looking for funding for my other company, my cybersecurity company. And no matter how many doors I knocked on, it was very difficult. And I said, you know what, I just got so frustrated. Well, let me take a step back. So when Bitcoin was going through its peak, I went to the Abilene Development Corporation or something like that. Every city has a development corporation where they try to bring it. And I said, hey, I want to start a blockchain company based on this. And I had a plan, everything was great, and we could take advantage of this. And they was like, no, that's very speculative. So then it finally dawned on me, I was like, why am I going to other people for money when we know Bitcoin is going to 10x in a couple of years? So that's how I started our own private company with 9 other people. And I said, okay, look, we're going to put money in, and this is speculative too, but everything is speculative nowadays, but when you're investing. So in 3 years, we charted out using the logarithmic scale of BTC. We said, let's take a bet. Let's bet on ourselves. Let's put the money that we would throw away on other stuff and say in 3 years we could potentially walk away with $2 million of BTC goes where we think it could go, minimum. And then let's invest that in our own businesses, our own tech companies, or even help other people with angel investing.
Got it. And then so with that, are you still investing now?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I hope it crashes. So some people are saying it's going down to $4,000 before the halving in May. I think it's going to get around 6, and that's a good thing because after the halving, which is I think May 20th or something like that projected.
It's somewhere in May.
Right. So then if you look at the last 2 times, about a year after the halving, it starts to creep up again.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we want to buy as much as we can when it goes low.
For sure. Interesting. Okay, so now from a different take on it, David. So you're on the technology side of things. I'd love if you talk more. We've talked about this a couple times. I'd love to learn a little bit more about the cryptography technology that you have, and it started out of the military. I'd love you to kind of tell that story for everybody.
Well, we had back during the late unpleasantness in Afghanistan and Iraq, we had a unique situation for the U.S. military where they had to work with coalition partners and handle very sensitive information with people that we couldn't vet and we shouldn't trust. So we had to create a new kind that we call it software-defined distributed key cryptography. You don't have to remember that, but essentially we had to come up with a way to be able to not just secure data. Securing data with cryptography is pretty simple if you're just doing it in your own environment.
Yeah.
But we had to make sure it was secured when it was shared. But the really tough assignment was to figure out how to control its use. So you share, right now you share data with somebody, they can do whatever they want to with it. You may have a contract or something like that, but contracts don't control data, software does.
Yeah.
So we had to figure out how to do that. Got the project ramped up, did all the certification work with CIA, NSA, all things you have to do when you're working in the IC, and then at the end of the last administration, the entire project was sequestered, which means scrapped. So we've now converted this to all commercial. The element that we were missing in our technology was proof. We did the security control, but you need to have provable, verifiable identities for users, for applications, for devices. And in order to have a complete record of how a piece of data is used, you need to take, when you can control it, you also need to report on its uses back to something. Well, as it turned out, this was the rise of the blockchain. The blockchain is a perfect technology for us to do the proof, to do the thing that we don't do. What our hope is for ourselves and for blockchain in general is that we love blockchain. We think it's a great place to start to solve a lot of endemic problems, but it really has to be that security and that control and reliability, trustworthiness that blockchain brings really needs to be extended to off-blockchain data.
Yeah.
And I think that's our role, is to make the blockchain even a more powerful concept than it is now by extending it to all data everywhere. That's kind of our vision.
Very interesting. Nice. And for you, so so you've been practicing law. What are you seeing from a blockchain, or like with companies that are approaching blockchain or thinking through that for cryptocurrency? What are the types of things that you're seeing?
So my background is a lot with traditional investors. So what you were saying before, I agree with a lot of that. And what I'm seeing is what's turning off some of the traditional investors when you see these companies come out and they say they're blockchain and really they're not, because it's kind of this fad and a lot of people are, they want to join the bandwagon, and people are in the investor interest. Well, unfortunately, it kind of goes up and down with the price of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's actually, and what's interesting is if you look at search history, right, is when Bitcoin is up, the search history for Bitcoin is just super high, of course, and then when it's low,
That's right.
yeah.
So I think one of the dangers for a new place like San Antonio and an organization like this and trying to get the name of blockchain, tech startups, is making sure that the companies are really what they say they are, and not just kind of slapping on some blockchain technology or just the word just to get investor interest. Because what I've seen, because I work throughout Texas, and what amazes me is how little attention San Antonio gets. And a lot of people, even just in Austin, I know a lot of investors there who've never invested in a San Antonio company, while they'll have a lot of investments in Houston and Dallas, even though their main focus may be Austin. So I've always thought, okay, this organization I would love the idea of it, because here's a chance for a new area of investment, and to kind of help build that organization and kind of get more attention with these kind of companies. And here's a city that has a lot of resources that are for it. I mean, there's a lot of the cybersecurity that is coming out of the Air Force being here.
Yeah.
So my perspective is going to be if I'm helping out a company, there's the legal part of it that I help them out with, but the other part of it is helping them talk to investors, because I deal with them. I represent investors sometimes, and other times I represent the investors. And so for me, it's I may not understand the technology. I'm not a tech guy, but I do think it's really important that I want to represent companies that are going to be strong and are going to get invested to help the whole industry grow. Because once you have one good investment here, other people follow.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's what it is. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the investors, they follow fads, so.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've reached a point with blockchain now where, from an investor side of things, is they don't want to hear blockchain like in the first part of it, right? So like back in 2017, a lot of companies would say like, oh, we're a blockchain company that does X, or we're a blockchain company that does Y. And now what you hear companies in the maturity of it is a lot of those companies that, you know, didn't necessarily have something tangible. It's more like, oh, we're a, you know, real estate company and we're leveraging some blockchain technology, right? Or, you know, we're a commerce company and we're leveraging some of the technology. Because at the end of the day, it's like what we're talking about is tech, right? Like, you know, you're buying, as a consumer, you just care that it solves your need, right? Like no one ever is ever going to use a piece of software. Like you're not going to open up, I don't know, Instagram and be like, oh, this is on blockchain, I love this, right? Like no one's going to do that or say that. But what you might say is like, oh, like my data is like super secure on this, and like I'm actually getting rewarded on my usage of Instagram, and every time I see an ad, I'm earning points or a coin or whatever, right? All the kind of elements that encompass or revolve around blockchain. But again, from a consumer context, you're never gonna say it. Just like you're not like, oh man, like this is the best AI I've ever seen, right? Like you're just more about the experience, right? So we both talked on cybersecurity. You're working on cybersecurity, and you know, basically we were doing cybersecurity with the military. Let's kind of go there. How is cybersecurity today? And then what do you think about the ability for blockchain to either improve? Like, how about, let me rephrase that. Does blockchain improve cybersecurity, or does it actually do the opposite? Like, from a cybersecurity standpoint, would you not want to have things in that context?
Is that a wild card question?
Yeah.
For anybody?
Yeah, for anybody.
I'll let you.
Oh, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. We think that, pardon? We think that the blockchain is absolutely vital to cybersecurity, but first you need to define what cybersecurity is.
Yeah.
And this would be a controversial statement for somebody. We think of cybersecurity as defense in depth, keeping the bad guys out. It basically comes from medieval doctrines for how to defend your castle. You build a layered defense. If they get through one layer, you catch them at the next, you catch them at the next, you catch them at the next.
A moat with alligators.
Exactly. 30 years of experience has shown one thing conclusively: that doesn't work. What you need is security. You need people to keep people that shouldn't have your data, shouldn't be able to get your data. You need control. People that should have your data can't do things with it that you don't want them to. But the other element that you need, again, is proof. You need to know who you're dealing with. Anonymity is the enemy of security, and it's the enemy of control. And in order to achieve cybersecurity, not the way that we're doing it, which is obviously failed. It doesn't fail if you're just protecting data in your own domain. It fails when you share it outside your domain, right? In order to be able to do that, you need this suite of, we think, our opinion, you need a suite of cryptographic technologies. You have to have provability. You have to know who you're talking to. You have to know where the device that the software is running came from. You have to know that its chipset has been altered in like an evil maid attack. And you need to be able to control the legitimate use of that data, because contracts don't control electrons, photons, or radio waves. Software does. And what controls data within software is cryptography. So we think that the path to truly solve the global cybersecurity and cyber privacy pandemic lies in blockchain and these other cryptographic technologies. So that's kind of our view of where cybersecurity has to go to succeed.
Yeah, very interesting. Anything you want to touch on that?
So my perspective is a little bit differently, or focus. Everything you said is correct. Everything. So what I focus on is the small to medium business sector, and usually those are the entities that don't have a lot of resources or knowledge to even begin to think about blockchain. So I'm thinking 5 or 10 years in the future, when we've move most of our cloud, most of our technology to the cloud. So, you know, if you look at it, a lot of technologies are just becoming abstract. You know, people have their cell phones and they got money here, you got all these things that we used to have, a physical thing that we could touch, and it's abstracted now. And that's happening in the business sector as well. So what we're betting on is that at some point, some form of cryptocurrency, whether it's Fed backed or backed by the Fed, like a US dollar that's printed by the Fed and it's digital, it's going to come into play at some point. And that's just the way we're going. And China right now has a digital RMB, which is the version of their currency. So what are those mom and pop shops going to do when we have digital currencies? If they can't keep their stuff secure now, what's going to happen when, you know, it's digital and it's not a credit card company? They don't go through ACH. They don't, you know, have something to touch to say that was a bounce check and I have it in my hand right now. So.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. And regardless of what size company you are, like you have an understanding that you want your data to be secure, right? Like, I remember, so I've been, like I said, I've been in retail technology for a lot of years, and I remember, I don't know, call it 6 years ago or so, trying to contact companies to get them to use a software that we had created that was an ad platform that would help with ads. And there's, you know, one of the things that we had to break down, or, you know, as a blocker for some of these companies, were like, they didn't like the concept of us having their data, right? But we needed their data to then be able to serve ads for them, right? And even though they didn't do anything with this data currently, like they didn't monetize their data, they didn't use any, like just the thought of someone else having access to it, they didn't like, right? And I think we'll continue to see that, you know, in blockchain as well, right? Is where you have some of these smaller companies like, hey, like, I don't quite understand how this works, but I don't want you to have access to it. And so it's going to take this education type period or software that kind of encompasses that and wraps that all into one. And then it goes back to what we were saying a moment ago, is that, again, is like, you know, how does this solve my needs, and less about like, what is this actual, you know, technology, right?
Yeah, that's what to add to what you're saying, what I see is kind of the goal of organizations like this is blockchain will eventually become, I think, it's just a tool. So as to your question is how is it with cybersecurity, I think it just becomes a part of it, just like, you know, there were organizations in the beginning about putting computers together, and now, you know, an actual server is just a commodity. I think right now we're in the kind of exciting early, you know, it's maturing a bit, but it's still the early stages of the blockchain, and so this technology is, we're trying to figure out different ways to use it. I think it'll just become an integral part of cybersecurity and a tool that's used within it, and there'll be different other tools that are used, but blockchain will be kind of an integral part of it. And so, I think what's exciting now is for those of us who get involved with it now is, well, you'll be part of that, right, of figuring out how is it, in which direction, and how is it actually going to be used as a tool.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to open it up to questions from anybody in the audience. Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask?
Well, this last point that you guys were just talking about made me think of, you know, the reluctance to do anything with data sets that exist within a certain enterprise. You know, especially since Cambridge Analytics was having, you know, a field day with data sets. But I think when people understand they can maintain anonymity and security and still leverage or utilize the insights in data, I think that's something that could be super useful. That one of the layers that we're interested in on our platform around that, but I don't know if you have any comments around that, where you kind of can offset sort of the paranoia about, you know, we've got to fortress our data, we can't do anything with it, but maybe this blockchain is a solution maybe to some of those fears, and how that data gets utilized while still protecting anonymity and, you know, that sort of thing, or security.
The blockchain in this, you know, this, I don't want to be overly commercial, but technologies like ours, I think solve that problem, because it works by cryptographically binding. We'll get into the details, but it binds
It's okay, go ahead and speak over ahead. If you don't
controls
mind.
to the data. It binds
Yes,
controls
yes.
to the data. Right, so that the person who is the owner or the custodian or the manager, creator of the data can decide exactly how that data can be used. And that's really the problem that all cybersecurity and cyber privacy solutions are trying to solve. It's not that complicated. I want to be in control of my data. I want to determine who, when, where, how it's used. And I want to do that for as long as that data exists. And the current approaches that we've had, SANS blockchain, SANS, things like our technology, have demonstrated that they don't work very well, right? So I think that the solution to that problem is exactly what we're in the beginning stages, and I think you're exactly right. We're years away from where this is a commodity, and it's something that just goes without saying. But that's how you get to become a commodity, right? By doing what we're doing here.
Yeah, I think you're on the front lines or the really frontier of, if you can get the cybersecurity sensitive clients, military, DoD, vendors or partners interested
healthcare.
to adopt,
Yeah.
but then if you can get those guys to do it, then it's like, then selling it to fintech or traditional financial institutions to adopt blockchain to increase security and also other perhaps tokenization features. Is like, we need you, because like you're a huge asset to the rest of us, you know, that are kind of working with other sectors that may be not as fortressed as the cybersecurity world. So I'm really interested in what you're learning and where you're able to make progress and inroads. That's hugely valuable.
I think one of the ways to articulate this to people that aren't necessarily aware or maybe have a bad impression of blockchain, is like, oh, blockchain is slow, or blockchain is not necessary, this or that, is like, you know, what is record management? Like, you know, like, so when you think about record management, it's exactly that. It's like, how are you managing data, and, you know, how is data currently stored? And then what is the level of access and the frequency that that data needs to be collected on, right? So if you were to create, if there was no concept of a database, and you were to create a database from zero, knowing what we know now, but you didn't have to build on old rails, kind of like we were talking about with loyalty a while ago, is you might think through a blockchain type concept, right? Context. And you know, that's for me is what's really interesting when it comes to blockchain. So just because it may or may not be slow now, doesn't mean that, you know, it won't improve, one. But two, there's certain things that don't necessarily need to be fast, right? Like, you know, real estate records. Right, like if right now when you purchase a home, there's, you know, there takes 3 days to go through escrow and all that, and rescinding period and all those sort of things. Like if something takes, I don't know, 20 minutes or an hour, however long to get recorded onto like an immutable ledger, do you care if you normally have to wait, you know, several days anyway? And so it's thinking about it from that context.
So is retrieval slow, or is the setup slow? That's what I'm saying.
No, it's not the setup. It's more. It's
Not even the retrievables, I would say, is slow, because you have instantaneous confirmation.
Right.
Like when I send that Bitcoin to
So
you,
what do we
you
do?
see it immediately. It's just confirmation process, which normally would be Swift or ACH
Right.
or any of the ISO or MOS processors. They take their time because they need to communicate with the other interbanks.
Right.
And also, what's not fair in the comparison too is that when banks do that, is that they're basically just escrowing it for you, right? And so, like, if I send a wire to you know, to someone else, you know, we might think it's instantaneously, but it's really not, right?
It's just not. We pay our overseas folks, it gets there the next day, if we get it in by 2 o'clock.
Right, exactly. Or like
It's
when
not
you,
that fast.
yeah.
Well, just as an attorney, I deal with issues that, like, you get a check
Bitcoin.
and you cash your check and you'll see it in your bank account, and the reality is the bank can take up to 7 days to actually verify it.
To process
and they'll
it.
pull that. And there's constant scams using that.
Yeah.
They'll pull the money back out because there was actually nothing in the check, but you saw it in your bank account.
Right.
But it took them 7 days. So
Yeah.
there's that kind of vision. That's
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
what's going on.
Exactly. So it's like, you know, when people think about all these other ways, like, oh, like it's so much faster, we don't need that. It's like, well, really, like, but just because the UI is nice, right? Like from your user experience might be fine because the banks have done good ways of making that easier and less friction for us. Doesn't mean it technically is, you know, is working at that capacity.
I think what organizations like this should do is help, you know, people learn about the technology, but then to help facilitate thinking about the problems that can be solved with it. Because I remember being young and hearing like, oh, you know, I had a Commodore VIC-20, and then people saying like, oh, with these little old computers, you'd be able to turn on and off the lights in your whole house. I remember hearing that back in the 80s, and we only really were able to conveniently be able to have control over your smart home until what, a couple years ago?
Yeah.
But they were saying about a computer being able to do that for 30 years now. It took a while to make it actually practical. But that was being hammered home to people as to this is a reason why you should have a computer. And I'm thinking the same thing with blockchain. As long as you have that imagination of here's a problem that you can solve, there's going to be issues that maybe it's not fast enough, maybe it's not this or that, but it will be. It will be. You will improve it as long as you get it step by step.
That's right.
You know, but again, we got a 30 or 40 year track record of, it starts out slow, but hey, bud, it gets faster.
Yeah.
But it's not gonna stop.
Never.
Is there a ransomware kind of value or benefit to blockchain, which could be a good argument or rationale? I mean, in terms of protecting data ultimately from intrusion and malware. I mean, where are we at?
Ransomware is a little bit kind of a beast, but a different kind of a beast.
You can
The
mess with
best
your firmware.
protection against ransomware is simply to have, offsite storage, basically. So you gotta be able to retrieve what's been, recreate, say, okay, you stole it, so what? I can get it all back from another source, the blockchain has a huge impact on being able to get into an environment in the first place. All cyber exploits, you see if you disagree or agree with this, you have three components to every cyber exploit, right? You have to be able to get onto the system, and then you have to be able to manipulate the software or the firmware, on that system. And then if it's a data exfiltration attack, you have to be able to get that data off that system. All of those things are a failure of authentication, right? They require some degree of failure of authentication. What is really good at delivering up verified IDs for anything, verifiable IDs, the trustworthy IDs? What's better at that than anything in the world that I know of right now technologically is the blockchain technologies, decentralized IDs.
I should have recorded that the way you just said
Yeah,
it.
decentralized IDs, things like that.
Right?
So-
Okay, good, thanks. Yeah, thanks. Let me
Yeah,
grab that later.
supply chain,
That's
think of the
exactly
supply
the
chain,
story I
again,
need.
if
Yeah, thank you.
you have a thing in cybersecurity called an evil maid attack, and you're in a hotel and somebody actually takes your hard drive out, clones and puts your hard drive back, right? And then they've got all your data and you leave the hotel and you don't know that. It's called an evil maid attack. If the blockchain, and look, Intel, Microsoft, Apple, they're all working on this stuff right now. Even as we speak, this is happening. This is happening now. They're building out their their blockchain supply chain infrastructure. Well, every time you start your computer up, if it has to authenticate the components of that device, and each of those has a blockchain recorded verify ID, you put a device on, you add something to a computer to sniff it or something like that, it's not going to pass its signature. It's been changed. It's not, the hash is not going to match, and you know that device has been compromised, right? If you do that to the data and that data goes someplace it's not supposed to go, then it's unusable. All of that is possible if you have the proofs that blockchain can provide, and then you can apply them to the hardware, the software, and the data.
Cool. Thanks. Excellent.
So I want to just throw some, so I think we get into, I'm not accusing you of this, we get into a scenario where we think blockchain is a one size fits all and it's a magic bullet, and so it really won't solve the malware issue. The malware issue is pretty much back up your data. And even if all your data is in the cloud, you still have to back it up. And if you redefine print on Google or AWS, they tell you your data.
Well, ransomware's backup.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
ransomware. Sorry, not said
Yeah.
Ransomware, yes,
Yeah,
back up
yeah.
your data. But in real world scenario, if you are afraid that you might get hit with ransomware, keep your private keys off of your computer.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if someone gets your passwords, or if your stuff isn't backed up, your private keys are gone, and then you're done.
Somebody else have a question?
Sorry, yeah.
Oh, you're fine.
Yeah, we're in that configuration adoption mode, so everything you guys talk about is super interesting to us.
Yeah,
Go
that is.
how about this? Let's flip it the other way.
Yeah.
Do you have a
We all have
question
questions.
for the audience that they should be thinking about when it comes to, you know, what blockchain or how they're thinking about it or learning about it?
I have a statement, is that, this goes back to my last thing, is that we've gotta figure out a way to, because there's been so much hype, we gotta talk about the myths a lot, because I think that's a big impediment with educating the public and starting a group. Because when they hear blockchain, the first thing they're gonna do is Bitcoin. And the first thing after Bitcoin is scam. So we've gotta educate people that those are three different dogs, and we're not trying to bring those three dogs into the system.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about what we do, and you know, you'll see this and learn, is like for us, it's again, just very much focusing on people that are actively working in the space, and then you know, across a space, right, across different things, maybe even things that we might not necessarily agree upon or whatever. You know, when it comes to cryptocurrencies, that we talk about cryptocurrencies is cryptocurrencies that actually have either utility behind them or you know, like a Bitcoin. And what's interesting, like we just had someone at our Seattle conference last week from Coinstar. And if you're not familiar with Coinstar, it's that big machine at the grocery store where you can put your change in it, right? And so you put your change in there and you can get gift cards, you can get cash, right? So recently they actually partnered with a Seattle company called CoinMe so that you can buy Bitcoin at the ATM. And so you put cash into the machine and you can buy Bitcoin. And so what's really interesting for that is that the reason why they're doing it is because there's revenue opportunity for them and it's meaningful revenue. So you know, that's what, you know, is really interesting when you think about these things, is like, hey, like when do companies start demanding Bitcoin? Like when do you go to the coffee shop and the coffee shop says like, okay, do you want to pay instead of like, you know, cash or card, is it cash or card or Bitcoin, or cash or card or, you know, whatever currency, right? And I definitely think those things will start to happen.
That'd be his coffee shop too. His
Yeah.
right? He'd be like,
Yeah. You know, and there's interesting ways like right now that you can earn Bitcoin or get Bitcoin, you know, without even having to spend or buy Bitcoin, right? Like you can, there's a loyalty app called Lolli, Lolli, and you can, it's a Chrome extension, and when you purchase things, you get rewards,
Everywhere.
cashback, and
Walmart, hotel.com.
Yep, you
You
get cashback
spend your
on that.
debit card, credit card, and you get up to, some of them are like 20%
Yeah.
Bitcoin.
I hear that too.
Yeah, so there's just, you know, there's interesting ways that you can try it. If you have a Coinbase, if you don't have a Coinbase account, you know, you can start one and just put, I recommend everybody just get a Coinbase account and just put $5 in, or Cash App, which is the Square, yeah. I actually like Cash App.
They'll give you $5 just for signing up.
Yeah, or yeah, if you're like, actually, I'll refer anybody, cause I get $5 and you get $5. Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
So, but anyways, it's like, the best way to figure out and how to learn this stuff is just to play with it, right? And it doesn't mean you have to put a mortgage payment in there, but put $5 in. Yeah, just put $5 and see it go up and down with $5, and you know, just kind of start to develop that understanding.
Awesome.
You said questions to the audience. If I had a question,
Yes.
it would be, because there already is a TF blockchain in Austin. We're trying to start up something in San Antonio. My question, I guess, the audience would be, what are advantages that San Antonio has in order to compete, essentially with, you know, there's a neighboring city of Austin that has it, but what makes San Antonio a good place to start a blockchain company?
That's a good question.
We got Jacob.
Yes. Well, completely different attitude and people and mentality, right?
I think also there's like some interesting, you know, companies that are based out of here, right? Like
Medtronics,
USAA.
USAA. You
Yeah.
also have, you know, what's their names that they actually bought the derivative business from USAA, one of the big Chicago, like gigantic Chicago finance company, and they're moving their headquarters here. I can't remember. I had to look at the San Antonio Business Journal. And then you have a lot of energy leaders here, Valero, Newstar, right? And that is going to be That's what we're looking at internally, is how do we quantify and timestamp and provide a mutable single source of truth for oil and its quality, right? And that's a gigantic thing that Austin doesn't mess around with, but that San Antonio does, right? So I think it's just understanding our strengths here as Texas in San Antonio, not Austin, not Houston, not Dallas, and build on those.
Well, I would throw this challenge out. Having worked in that world for 7 or 8 years, you've got U.S. Cyber Command 24th Air Force is here,
That's true.
right? And dirty little secret, this is going to be shocking. I'm glad you're all sitting down, but people who work for the government in cryptography and cybersecurity don't usually plan on staying there for the rest of their
No,
career.
they don't.
So
That's right.
you have this, you've got a constant supply of people that have
fresh
the
talent.
sort of profound experience that they gained working in military cyber that probably would like to stay here because it's a great place to live, but they need private companies that can absorb their skill set.
Their skill set, yeah.
And all of this stuff that we're talking about is based on cryptography, things that they had to learn to do their job over at 24th Air Force.
Mhm.
Give them a reason to stay here.
No, I think you tie onto the other one is we've talked to some of our other partners is the arbitrage of
Yeah.
cost of living and that right there, what you just said, this plethora of talent
Yeah.
that is available to us that is not being tapped into, that they
Well,
go to Austin,
they
they
don't
go
want-
to LA and San Francisco, but do they want to go there and pay those prices? No.
I can't say I can't say this for sure, but I bet you if you were able to study the demographics and stuff like that they are just going an hour up the road.
Well,
Yeah.
some of them, but we actually are getting brain gain here now, and because
Some-
we
yes,
have
we are.
a burgeoning startup ecosystem and an innovation district downtown.
Excellent.
Starting with
Excellent.
Geekdom and kind of growing out. A lot of the startups now are some of these guys that worked on the 24th that are, guys like Jungle Disk and Cyber Fortress, and a lot of the new startups are very cybersecurity centric, a lot of them, as well as, what's happening at Velocity, Texas, which is kind of bio
Yeah,
tech,
Velocity,
but
biotech,
also kind of
Southwest
some
Research.
cyber centric, and what's happening also at the port,
Port of San Antonio,
and they're building actually
data science.
yeah, like this, like so much going on, but I would think that, every year the growth of our startup ecosystem is sort of like on a multiplier kind of trajectory, which, we're not trying to be Austin, but, having a San Antonio startup myself, I'm kind of in being part of this ecosystem. I kind of feel like there's a lot of ways we're aspirant and we're not any of those other guys yet, but also we have our own, secret sauce, which is we're curious, we're kind of disrupting in a few areas that are, some of them are under the radar, which I think makes us very blockchain compatible because, it isn't the big unicorn thing that we're talking about earlier. It's a lot of under the hood, plumbers of the internet, people doing something that get this and will immediately understand how to apply it, which I would suggest that one of our upcoming, blockchain meetups, we should just host it at Geekdom.
Yeah.
And make it part of the curriculum, because nobody's like, whoa, dude, okay,
Yeah,
let's do that.
Any thoughts on any like existing startup groups that are here in town? Like, love to partner with them and love to do things together with them and do things with them, have them do things with us. Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah,
We
that's
can
using,
connect that.
confession, I've been out of the state for 5 years, and we
Okay.
moved up to Colorado, and we just moved back to Dallas 6 weeks ago, so I've lost track of what's happening down
I'd be
there.
happy to
I'd love to find out.
I'd be happy to give any of you guys a tour of what's going on Houston Street right now. So this is kind of the etymology of it, right? Or the cultural epistemology or something, what happened here. So Graham Weston was trying to attract different types of talent to Rackspace, and he got a bunch of rejection letters from some of these acqui-hires that, they didn't want to come to San Antonio because there was no startup scene, there wasn't a millennial scene, there wasn't any rooftop bars, whatever. And this was like, it's like 7-8 years ago, right? And this has now become a famous email. And he went, F it. So he and Nick Longo invested in, we started Geekdom, and then he decided that he was gonna make downtown a startup ecosystem and invest in all the things. Now UTSA downtown is doing all these kinds of things that are gonna help ignite that. But there's like a number of things that have been happening here in the past, mostly half a decade, that instead of having 2 or 3 startups, we have 100. you know, and now we have a bit of a VC thing happening, you know, with Animal Angels and a few other things, and Geekdom Fund. Actually, I just won one of the funds for my startup recently in a pitch thing, so I'm happy about that. But there's stuff going on right now that wasn't going on even 3 years ago, and even 5 years ago.
And the real estate to match it.
Huh?
The real estate to match it.
Oh yeah,
type
and
of
the
living.
investment in the type of real estate.
That's right, the type
Yeah,
of real estate.
yeah, the types of
infill
companies
living.
between Silver Ventures and Gray Street Partners, what they're building, you know, is, you know, creating that whole, it's just transforming. So I think it's ripe, it's perfect, your timing is spot on right now to kind of go out there and blow this thing up here, actually.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Can I say two things about the veterans? So first, I'm an Air Force veteran, so I could speak to this. Here's what happens when you're a veteran. You got all these programs, and everybody says thank you for your service, but I know this is probably not gonna. We're still filming? Okay, so I'll keep it clean. Unfortunately, the way you might feel, this may be a lot of veterans feel like it's all a bunch of BS. So what ends up happening is you have these guys who've done these amazing things, like action movie quality things, and then they go for an interview, and that interviewer has never been in the military. They don't understand what they did. They can't translate it. It's up to the veteran to try to translate, which sometimes is hard. And what essentially the hiring manager of a company wants that veteran who's done all these heroic things is to tone themselves down so that they could fit into that job.
Fix the printer.
Yeah, that's a great, he said fix the printer, so that's a very good analogy. So San Antonio right now doesn't have the capacity to absorb all of those great individuals who are doing these great things. So then the second part is, you don't want to become Silicon Valley. You don't want to become Austin.
No.
You do not. Culturally and financially, do not, please, I beg you, do not make this a haven for VCs. VCs are appropriate for the Googles, the Facebooks, which we've grown along. But in cybersecurity, there are plenty of businesses that aren't going to 10x, but they still have an important role in the economy, in science and tech, etc. And you have to support those companies that aren't going to go from 100,000 to $1 billion in 5 years.
You see what we're doing with our
Would you-
Patriot Boot
you
Camp
would
stuff here now? in
I'm
San
sorry,
Antonio?
say again?
You see what we've been doing with our Patriot Boot Camps in town, and
Yeah.
how the transitioning vets are actually getting part of, you know, either getting great tech jobs or becoming entrepreneurially oriented.
Right.
So some good stuff happening, but yeah, you're right, we're safe now, we won't become Sand Hill Road. We're safe.
I would camp on something you said and ask you. I want to be moderator for a second.
Go on.
Because this is a very interesting topic to me. It's not VCs. It's because I would say there's a class of VCs that are, and unfortunately it's a big class of VCs that are just the unicorn chasers.
Yeah.
But since 2000, since the dot bomb, the number of IPOs in the United States is down about 85 or 90%. We need VCs. Everybody needs venture capital, but we need venture capitals who are willing to do the plumbing and not chase unicorns.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
that's one of the
And tap into the local community
You can have all the
doing it.
technology in the world, but you need the investment capital that's willing to. And your analogy for plumbing is perfect. The plumbing of the internet and software and the way that we do things is bad. The concept is great, but the plumbing sucks, and somebody needs to replace it. It's not sexy. It's financially very. You can make a lot of money at it, but you can't be chasing the next, fantastic high visibility social media play.
Don't just think exit, think going concern, right? Essentially.
Yeah,
That's right.
Exactly. So
Jobs
from a
created.
VC standpoint, the guys that are not unicorn chasers, who are willing to take a little bit of time and actually learn a little bit about the technology that they're investing in, oh Lord, do we need those guys?
So appropriately, we need the pre-seed and the angel investing. There's an appropriate place for a VC when you can 10x from the investment. But San Antonio right now needs a lot of seed capital, and seed capital that's willing to have an open mind.
And smart seed capital, willing to learn seed capital.
Well, it seems like there's a lot of really good things in store for San Antonio. I've really enjoyed my time here. I've told Jacob like 10 times like how charming of a city I think San Antonio is. Like I really have enjoyed it. So I think with that, let's go ahead and end for this time. But you know, so our first TF blockchain San Antonio chapter is in the books. Let's give everybody a round of applause. The speakers will be here. You know, want you to continue networking and chatting with each other. And I didn't tell these guys this, so I apologize. But what's a question we want to leave the audience with that they can continue to network on? You know, probably something to do with San Antonio and capital. I think so, right? Does anybody have one they want to present?
What?
Or a question to the audience that you want to leave them with to think about.
How can you evangelize the importance of blockchain in the local economy?
That's right.
Nice.
Love it.
Yeah. Same thing, I mean, work on your elevator pitch, that's your challenge.
Yeah. Blockchain. Awesome. Great. Well, thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you guys.